Howdy everyone, I'm your host Andy from Zeldom. Tears of the Kingdom has been well received by the community, but dear Hylia, it has created a mess for us theorists to work with. When Breath of the Wild was released, its relation to the already messy Zelda timeline was left ambiguous. But despite the inclusion of elements from traditional Zelda lore into Tears of the Kingdom, such as the sages, subtle references to gods, and of course, Big Daddy Ganondorf, the story in these two games just doesn't seem to fit well with the past, lore-centric titles such as Ocarina of Time and Skyward Sword. As a Zelda theorist, I will keep making videos incorporating traditional Zelda lore with these new titles. However, before I release my upcoming theories, I'd like to propose a theory that suggests Nintendo could be retconning all Zelda titles before Breath of the Wild. I'm not fond of this idea myself, but honestly, it seems to be the most likely explanation for all the inconsistencies between Tears of the Kingdom and the Zelda universe as we know it. So without further delay, let's dive into it. Ever since Breath of the Wild was released, it felt somewhat independent from the rest of the series, and over the last 6 years, fans have created numerous theories trying to fit Breath of the Wild into the pre-existing timeline. Eiji Aonuma has even gone on record saying that there's a reason they haven't explained the timeline connections for it. We realized that people were enjoying imagining the story that emerged from the fragmental imagery we were providing. If we defined a restricted timeline, then there would be a definitive story and it would eliminate the room for imagination, which wouldn't be as fun. We want players to be able to continue having fun imagining this world even after they have finished the game, so this time, we decided that we would avoid making clarifications. I hope that everyone can find their own answer in their own way. I guess this is partially the fault of us theorists for creating lore continuity for Nintendo, but it is unfortunate that Nintendo has made this decision considering how much our fanbase values story continuity. But despite this announcement, the Japanese version of Nintendo's official website went ahead and slapped Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom at the end of all 3 timeline branches. It is important to note that although these 2 games are listed at the end of each timeline, there is a section divider between the previous games and the latest 2 installments. This has led to many theories involving some sort of timeline convergence between the 3 branches of the established Zelda timeline, because, well, how else are you supposed to apply 3 very different histories into a single story? I can understand why so many fans buy into this timeline convergence idea. After all, Breath of the Wild does contain countless references to each timeline. I'm not going to go into the details of this since the game has been out for 6 years, and as such, many videos about these references have already been made. While I do understand where this timeline convergence idea comes from, it can't be as simple as the timelines merely merging together. We could possibly come up with some crazy time travel shenanigans to make a timeline convergence plausible, but even then, it would have to involve quite a bit of unique interpretation and speculation of events. So as of right now, a timeline convergence probably isn't the most likely explanation to our dilemma. The Zelda timeline is pretty straightforward, starting at Skyward Sword, but in Ocarina of Time, we reasonably end up with the child and adult timelines, and somehow a hypothetical downfall timeline as well. From here, each of these creates its own unique history. In the adult era, Hyrule is flooded, creating the Great Sea. In the child era, Ganondorf's plot is interrupted, Link travels to Termina, and later a hero has to defeat Ganondorf in the Twilight Invasion. And finally, in the Downfall timeline, all sorts of crazy things occur with a constant cycle of defeating and resurrecting Ganon. We can clearly see that after the branching from Ocarina of Time, the histories of each timeline become vastly different from one another. Although it is theoretically possible for 2 independent timelines to contain the same event, that isn't a convergence since they still have completely different histories. As such, it just doesn't make any sense for all the events from these timelines to have occurred within Breath of the Wild's history. So if a timeline convergence isn't the answer, how else do we explain all the references to past stories in the Hyrule present in Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom? Most of you will probably cringe at this, but all past titles could just be mere legends of Zelda. Or in other words, all Zelda titles prior to Breath of the Wild are nothing more than legends in the present Hyrule. I know retconning all past Zelda games as legends is not ideal, but it honestly seems like it's what Nintendo is trying to do, and it would solve nearly every inconsistency we see between Tears of the Kingdom, Breath of the Wild, and the former timeline. For example, if you really think about it, it doesn't make any sense for Hyrule and Breath of the Wild to have lakes named after Mikau and Lulu from Majora's Mask. Those characters existed in an entirely different world, so why would inhabitants of Hyrule have named landmarks after these characters? If all past games were just legends, which are embellished and unauthenticated retellings of history, then lakes in Hyrule named after Mikau and Lulu from Majora's Mask story would now make sense, and the same logic can be applied to most other references in Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, such as the sculpture of Demani III on Death Mountain, item descriptions mentioning the Great Sea from Wind Waker, and so forth. There are plenty more examples from Breath of the Wild, but Tears of the Kingdom offers additional hints supporting this retcon theory. In the cutscenes, the Zonai were said to have appeared as gods to the people of Hyrule when they descended from the heavens. This suggests the possibility that the Golden Goddesses, as described in Ocarina of Time, Skyward Sword, and other titles, could be diluted descriptions of historical events. The imprisoning war shown in the memory cutscenes also has some similarities to the events of Ocarina of Time. In both stories, Ganondorf appears before the King of Hyrule to swear his loyalty, but is actually playing Jafar and then wreaks havoc. They even both contain time travel plagued with paradoxes. While it is possible that history could have repeated itself verbatim like this, these parallels can also be interpreted to support the notion that Tears of the Kingdom replaces the story depicted in Ocarina of Time. Legends are often based on some degree of historical truth, so the floating islands, such as Skyloft and the City in the Sky from Skyward Sword and Twilight Princess respectively, may have just been misunderstood stories of the Zonai Sky Islands. The Uka in Twilight Princess are said to have been very close to the gods and helped to build the City in the Sky. I'm not going to go off on another theory about this right now, but it seems possible that our knowledge of the Uka, or Sky People from Twilight Princess, could also pertain to the Zonai. Additionally, the construct also states that the Great Sky Island was cut out of the earth by the power of the ancient sages to protect the Temple of Time from the inevitable return of the Demon King. This is very similar to Hylia cutting Skyloft from the earth and sending it skyward to protect the Triforce from Demise's inevitable return. My point of this video isn't to analyze every detail from every game in depth, so I won't go further. I'm just trying to point out that Tears of the Kingdom may simply be rewriting some of these same events. I totally understand that retconning all past Zelda lore would be a major shame, but I made this video because I think it's the most likely answer for why Nintendo made the decision they did while making the new game. The Curse of Demise, the Golden Goddesses, and the Triforce are all elements I wish made it directly into Tears of the Kingdom, and I really hope that I'm wrong about Nintendo doing away with it, but if this is the case, it doesn't have to diminish the significance of the old games. Tears of the Kingdom most clearly references plot points from Ocarina of Time and details from Skyward Sword, and most likely will include references to several other stories as well. And regardless of whether or not this theory is correct, I will continue to make theories and videos, including all the traditional Zelda lore we know and love. I also have a theory in the works that attempts to come up with some possible explanation for how Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom could fit into the lore alongside the rest of the games. But until then, thank you all for watching, Zeldom out.